Welcome to this special episode of Faithful Resistance, where we'll explore resisting and the law. What do we do when laws, or the ways laws are executed and enforced, fly in the face of our deeply held values? We'll have a conversation with a court watcher on the practical implications, and we'll talk with JUC's senior minister about the spiritual basis for resisting the law. We'll start with a conversation about the new practice of court watching in Colorado. It started because of ICE agents arresting immigrants at federal courthouses around the country. This is the way that the New York Times describes the practice. Part of an aggressive new initiative by Immigration and Customs Enforcement to detain migrants at immigration courts. It's the latest escalation by the Trump administration and its all-out effort to ramp up deportations. Agents have begun arresting migrants immediately after their hearings if their cases have been dismissed, a move that enables their swift removal. So we'll talk first with the woman who coordinates court-watching volunteers through the American Friends Service Committee in Colorado. We're so glad to welcome Mary McEwen today, who is the Court Watch Coordinator in Colorado. And the reason we're so glad to welcome you, Mary, is we want to find out what's happening in Colorado, what's happening at the Denver Federal Courthouse. So can we just start out by you giving kind of an overview of what you've been observing?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me. It's been 2.5 weeks at this point, I think. And the week before that, we were seeing in other states that ICE was doing this tricky new tactic where the judges are dismissing cases, which initially sounds great to immigrants, and then it's not great because they lose their status at that point. And then when they step out into the hall, the ICE was waiting. So because we saw that in other states, we decided to set up having people in the courthouses here, outside and inside, to kind of keep eyes on and to try to protect people. Unfortunately, we were correct, and it did come here as of not last Thursday, but the Thursday before was the first time we saw that tactic here. We saw it Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, I believe. For a total of 9 people detained, including families, including a mother, father, and a 1-year-old. We got inside moments after it had happened, and the attorney for the family was understandably freaking out.
So legally, ICE can be there. Is that right? Because there's a Colorado law against ICE being at state courthouses, but not at federal court.
Yeah, but it's federal, so the rules don't apply. The state law doesn't apply to a federal courthouse, is my understanding.
And so where are these agents hanging out?
They're hanging. There's a hall that the off of the courtrooms, and they have been hanging out in the hall right outside the courtroom doors.
And then as soon as people come out, they're placed in handcuffs?
They're put under arrest and whisked through a back sort of emergency exit door that we believe goes to a stairwell. And after that, we're not sure what happens. We have noticed several unmarked SUV, dark tinted window type things going into the parking garage that is in the back of the courthouse. So we believe that they're putting people into those and then taking them to Centennial where the ICE office is. And then from there, we don't really know.
Do you know if any of the people have been deported?
We don't know anything about what became of them, especially the families, because Colorado doesn't have, the Geo Detention Center here doesn't house families, doesn't house minors. So they probably had to take them out of state somewhere.
Well, let's talk about what a court watcher does and what good you can possibly do.
Well, like I kind of already indicated, we're just there to keep eyes on if we suspect that people lurking in the halls are ICE, then we can activate more people from the Colorado Rapid Response Network to come and just have eyes on in the courthouse or outside. We haven't really seen them outside, and I mean, why would they do it outside in broad daylight when they can do it inside the courthouse and whisk people down back ways? So
can you warn? Can you go inside a courtroom and warn people that ICE is there?
No, that would get us kicked out in a heartbeat.
Let's just take a step back. Who are the court watchers? Under what organization do you function?
Okay, so it started with AFSC, who I'm a volunteer for. That's American Friends Service Committee, a Quaker organization. They're very involved in immigrant rights. I've been volunteering with them since like 2017, since Trump 1.0. They're the ones that wanted to set something up. So a bunch of us volunteered. Volunteers helped set it up. We also we wanted people that had some sort of training in at least dealing with law enforcement. So we used the Colorado Rapid Response Network confirmers, which I'm also one of, to start. And then it kind of just was like word of mouth from there of trusted folks to add to the mix so that we could have trusted people on site.
So you've been doing this for years, you said, not the court watching, but volunteering with the Friends Service Committee.
Yeah. Yes.
Why do you do this? Why is this important to you as an Anglo woman?
It's just so egregiously wrong. I mean, I can't not do it, really. I mean, I feel called to help where I can and use my white, middle-aged citizen privilege to help those who weren't born in that privilege. Well, I was a high school teacher in Aurora, so that's how I first got involved in immigrant rights, was like in probably 2012, whenever DACA started, helping kids and their families fill out DACA applications. And that just kind of plugged me in way back then. And it's something I'm passionate about.
We're recording this after several days of protests and demonstrations, and including many arrests in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles mostly.
Right.
You and your other volunteers and your colleagues must have been talking about this, and I wonder where you see this going. I wonder where you see this going.
We definitely have talked about it. They're definitely coming for sanctuary cities, which we are as well. So I don't think anybody would be surprised if something similar came here. So yeah, I think we're just going to keep exercising our First Amendment rights and protecting our neighbors.
So as you sit here in the middle of June of 2025, what's your dearest hope for how this develops?
My dearest hope is that we would get immigration reform, which we've been screaming about for decades. That's why we're in this predicament to start with. People say they should come the legal way. Well, these people are trying to do the convoluted system that is, once you're inside the courtroom, you understand how even more convoluted it is than you imagined. So a much more streamlined process for people that are just coming for a better life and trying to work, trying to do all the right things would be my hope. I don't know that we're going to get it with this administration,
but you got to hang in the meantime.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on short notice, especially, Mary, to talk about the court watchers in Denver through the American Friends Service Committee and immigrant protection teams. We appreciate your work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So that was definitely the practical side of court watching as a form of resistance. We now turn to a conversation about the faithful side of the equation with Reverend Wendy Williams, the senior minister at Jefferson Unitarian Church. Welcome, Reverend Wendy Williams from Jefferson Unitarian Church. And I tease her that she's the one that we bring on the podcast to ask all those easy questions. And in this day and age of all the angst about immigration and immigration laws and protesting, that's why we're talking to you today, Wendy. And I wonder, with all the emphasis on immigration and deportations these days, kind of a baseline is to think about maybe religious texts that are, I would say, important to you or important to us as Unitarian Universalism, that kind of give us the moral basis for how we look about treating our neighbors and immigration. Shall we start there?
Sure. It is a softball, but turnabout is fair play. I'm always doing that with you and the rest of the congregation, so I guess it's good that you do it to me too. I think it's important to note that in the Abrahamic faiths, loving and welcoming the stranger is at the core. And it centers on the fact that at the time that those texts were written, the stories are being told, it was the Middle East, what we now know of as the Middle East. It was the desert. It was, if you didn't care for the stranger as yourself, if you didn't know that there were people who were out there caring for the stranger, which could be you or your family or somebody that you love, truly, you would die. You would die from heat and without water. And there wasn't this expectation of privacy and of protecting your turf in the same way that colonial times have so strongly imprinted upon us. So I think about most of both the Hebrew and the Christian Bible as being about welcoming the stranger and loving the stranger. I think that the time of Passover in the Jewish tradition is so powerful. For once you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. We have all known that. And so it is our responsibility, it's our call as part of being alive and part of being human to care for each other, to survive together, because none of us survive alone.
And even though these texts were written millennia ago, it seems like they still are at the heart of how we think of ourselves as religious people.
Absolutely. I mean, we've gone on this grand journey to prove our independence and to have science conquer all. But the very reality remains we are hardwired to be social creatures. We don't, any of us exist alone. We aren't birthed by ourselves. We don't die alone. We don't come of age alone. We need one another. And that's the beauty. I mean, there's troublesome things in old religious texts, to be sure, with our modern sensibility. But at the core, this notion of loving your neighbor, of caring for one another, is a deeply religious and very modern notion. It's necessary. It's as necessary in these modern times as it was ago. Though we can be in more denial about it because we can pick up our phone and push a button and have something delivered in an hour. And that other person who's bringing it to us, who's pulling it off a shelf, is invisible to us, as are the people who made it. Yeah.
So many of us are struggling, I think, now with how we take this baseline of loving our neighbor and taking care of each other, and how we take that in the one hand and then take our laws about immigration and the emphasis on deportation, how we square those things, how we square our religious passions and following the law. It's a really tough time for that.
It's really troublesome. And I think most of us have lived our lives on the side of the law that keeps us on this side of a jail cell, right? So that's certainly understandable. But there comes a point where the laws of empire, the laws of colonialism, the laws of protecting your own turf maybe aren't our highest calling. And I think that's the point where we are right now.
where
Go ahead.
compassion is more important than the national laws?
We're compassion, we're caring for your neighbor, we're understanding we're in this together. The old wisdom of first they came for this group, then they came for that group, and I'm probably next, is very present right now, I think, for many of us. And so while I think there's also a place where I'll say that staying on this side of the law also calls for us to work for change. And, there are sanctuary possibilities even with today's laws. And so working to support people in sanctuary as we work maybe to reform immigration, and also to say to our government, yes, and could we have compassion? Are we really about breaking up families? Are we really about leaving children homeless? Are we following our own laws and our own legal sensibilities? I'll put it like that. There seems to be maybe a leaning into a presuming that people are not only here illegally, but have done really wrong things with very thin, if any, evidence. So I think it's a whole picture. It's being compassionate about the situation people are in. It's recognizing that not every immigrant, in fact, I suspect quite few immigrants have entered this country or any other to do wrong, but out of desperation. And with the increase, I'll say it like this, the palpability of the climate crisis, the climate collapse, there are people leaving their homeland because they simply cannot exist there anymore. So what responsibility do we hold for that as a country that has been a primary impact on the climate collapse? So how do we think about that? And how do we say, we're in this situation, there is no way, you can't escape. How are we going to hold one another and do better together? Not in service of, not in direct opposition to current laws, but to say, really, is this the best we can do?
I don't, but I know we've all had conversations where we say, after having a conversation like this, for example, I feel really strongly that I need to do what I can to help protect these people because they, as you say, they haven't come here to break the law. They've come here out of desperation. And then press secretaries and presidents and VPs and members of Congress get up and say, but they're here illegally and they broke the law and they're horrible people. And, the riding down the escalator years ago saying they're rapists and they're horrible people. And I can't figure out how we're ever going to come to any kind of middle ground. Maybe that's not the goal. But where do you think it can go from here?
Yeah, I mean, this is the hard part, right? This is the really hard part because we don't get to know what it looks like. I wish we did. I wish just off to my right or left, I had a barrel of pixie dust and I could sprinkle it magically and that we could know. But I always come back to what Martin Luther King says. The nature of faith is taking the step, even though you can't see the staircase. That's, I'm sure, that's not exact, but that's the essence of what he said. And I think that's true. So for me, I live every day trying to stay in my lane, doing the next right thing. And I don't get to know what it looks like. I don't get to know. But I know, and given last weekend's events in Boulder, right? Protesting is alarming. It's last weekend awakened in many of us. It's like, oh, it's not only that I might not be comfortable going and standing somewhere in heat or cold or wind or rain, but this could really cost me something. There are people out there who would do me harm. And as a religious question, I have to ask myself, what is my life about? Is it about the length of years? Is it about the quality? Do I live what I preach? Do I live what I believe? And there are places in which we need to show up, whether that's court companioning or whether that's being on the steps or the lawn of the Capitol and saying enough. Given the brilliance of our history and the tragedy of our history, let's lean into the brilliance. Let's lean into the wisdom of what our ancestors had to say to each other, rather than the self-protection and the lesser angels of human nature, I'll say.
And there are certainly many who say now, not all of them spiritual leaders, some of them political leaders, or, I don't know, columnists in the New York Times, who say that the only way we're going to make things change is for there to be mass resistance. And not just politically divided resistance, just mass of all parties and all persuasions.
That's right. This is not who we are, and we're going to show up and link arms and stop making our first question, who did you vote for? Because my deep suspicion is, just as is true with people who I voted for, I don't always agree with the decisions they make. I don't always agree with the way they live their life. Many of them I have never wanted to sit down and have a meal, let alone a cup of tea with. And I suspect that's true of people who might have voted differently than I did in the last election. Perhaps they're waking up on this day and being not so excited about where things are. And so, again, the question becomes not who did you vote for, but is this the best of who we are? Is this what we want to leave to our kids? How can we be together? How can we, yes, keep the country safe, whatever that means, and also care about its inhabitants? And truly, is our best solution to ship people to a country they didn't even come from? What? So that's what inspires my compassion, is to say, truly, is this about protecting our borders, or is this about punishing?
This is a conversation that can probably go on for months or more years, and we appreciate you joining us today for another in our conversations, and hope you'll come back and join us again. Thank you.
Oh, I'd be glad to. Thank you.
If you have ideas for topics or people to interview, please email us at faithfulresistance@jeffersonunitarian.org. And please share this podcast with other people of goodwill and subscribe. And for opportunities for social justice action and education, including marches and protests and classes and many other ways to do your part, please check out the Faithful Resistance page at our website, jeffersonunitarian.org. And then just keep on doing the next right thing. Go out, do the next right thing.